Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear students, Assalamu alaikum. As we were talking about the 16th century literature previously, that was the age of Shakespeare or Elizabethan age or Renaissance period in the history of English literature. Now we are going to talk about the 17th century English literature, that is known as the Puritan age. Fine. So as I told you, different terminologies relevant to every era in the history of English literature. So this is one of the era, and that is comprised of the whole 17th century, or classes history of English literature. My dear students, I hope you are learning the things in a good way. I'm trying to make everything very simple for you. I'm trying to give you the concept first, and then we'll talk about the prominent works from the history of English literature and the importance of those works. I hope you're doing things in a detailed way in poetry or in history of English language as well, so you'll have to take things along with you all the way. Fine. So this is the Puritan age, and this is lecture 8. Fine. First of all, I'd just like to introduce Puritan age. What do we mean by this Puritan age? The literature of the 17th century may be divided into two periods. So this is about 17th century literature. So this is divided into two periods basically. The Puritan age, this is the first age, or the age of Milton. So whenever I refer to the Puritan age or the age of Milton, so both are same, because John Milton was the prominent figure from the Puritan age. Okay, so that age was basically comprised of 60 years that was started in 1600 and ended up in 1660. Okay, which is further divided into two more periods, the Jacobean period and Caroline periods, after the names of the ruled James I and Charles I. James I and Charles I, who ruled from 1603 to 1625 and 1625 to 1649 respectively. So my dear students, like Puritan age, this is not just age of Milton, this is further divided into two more periods. One is known as the Jacobean period and the other one is the Caroline period. Fine. Okay, two periods, just come to this point. This is like about two periods. Fine, about two periods. Fine. So the further division of the period number 1, that is the Puritan age, that is the Caroline and the Jacobean period. The second period in 17th century literature is the Restoration period or the age of Dryden. So here you can see the Puritan age or the age of Milton, the Restoration period or the age of Dryden. So here, my dear students, you can see like the age of Dryden was started in 1660 and was ended in 1700, 40 years. Fine. Previously, age of Milton is comprised of 60 years. So this is a whole full-fledged century, 17th century literature. Fine. So first period is the Puritan age and the second one is the Restoration period. Fine. So when we just give it a name, the 17th century literature, so 17th century literature, so my dear students, basically 17th century literature is divided into two periods. One is the Puritan age and the other one is the Restoration period, the age of Dryden. Okay, today in this class we'll focus on the Puritan age or the age of Milton. So we'll talk about all the prominent figures, literary figures in the Puritan age, with the particular focus on the writings of John Milton. Fine. What do we mean by Puritan age? The decline of the Renaissance period. As time and again I tell you, almost in all lectures, that when you introduce any new literary movement and when there is a political decline of one party and the new kings and queens, they rule over one country, so they come up with new spirits, new thinking, and they usually deny the previous facts. Fine. So same is the case with here. Previously we were talking about 16th century literature, that is the Renaissance period or the age of Shakespeare as well. So here you can see in the Puritan age, you can see the decline of the Renaissance period, the last century, the 16th century spirit. Okay, the writers either imitated the great masters of Elizabethan period or followed new paths. So that was, you can say, some of the writers, they might have imitated the greater masters of Elizabethan period. They might have followed, you know, Shakespeare, or you can say Spenser or Marlowe, or they have followed new paths. So they were free, okay, they were not bound to follow the Elizabethan writers. We no longer find great imaginative writers of the stature of Shakespeare, Spenser and Sidney. So here imaginative writers are not present in the Puritan age. You'll find a lot of difference between Renaissance and you know, Puritan age. I just want you to recall some of the things from the previous lecture. My dear students, you can see, like, we took a start from the Anglo-Saxon period, that is the very first period in the history of English literature. Then we went for, you know, the Anglo-Norman period, then there is Renaissance period, and now this is the fourth period, that is known as the Puritan age or the 17th century literature as well. Fine. So my dear students, what you have to keep in mind, the thing is that the basic concept is that in the 17th century there is the decline of the Renaissance period. Okay, so we don't have great imaginative poets like Spenser or Shakespeare or Sidney in the 17th century literature. Modern temperament. So here you can say, like, writers, they are towards modernism a lot in the Puritan age. The spirit of observation and of perception with details and a systematic analysis of facts, feelings and ideas. So basically they usually rely on their own observation and on preoccupation with details and a systematic analysis of facts as well, and feelings and ideas. So here, my dear students, you can say that this is the difference. Okay, so this is basically the difference in their approach, like how they prefer to go for the spirituality of their observation and preoccupation with details. Previously, the things which were preoccupied by the Renaissance authors, so here they need the details and then the systematic analysis of facts, feelings and ideas. So everything is in a systematic way. This is not only systematic, but there is a systematic analysis of facts, feelings and ideas. Fine. It was the spirit of science popularized by such great men as Newton, Bacon and Descartes. Fine. So here, my dear students, like the spirit of the science is also very much common here, like which was later on popularized by Newton, Bacon and Descartes. Fine. So you can see the things here, the spirit of observation and the spirit of science, two terminologies we have used, and we are no longer going with the imaginative writers of the Elizabethan age. So these are the important facts which are relevant to the Puritan age. Fine. What are the characteristics of the 17th century literature? Basically, the art of biography, which was unknown during the 16th century. So this is the most prominent characteristic of the 17th century literature. My dear students, as I told you when we were doing Elizabethan age as well, like there was, and we don't have much material relevant to Shakespeare's life. Why? Because they don't have they didn't have the trend of writing biographies or autobiographies during the Elizabethan age. So here you'll find out a new trend, that is of biography or autobiography writing. Okay, autobiography also came in the wake of biography, and later on keeping of diaries and writing of journals became popular. For example, Pepys diary and Fox's journal. So here you will find out the different trends. Previously we were just limited to writing poetry, drama and prose. Here you'll find a new trend, that is writing biographies and autobiographies, and plus keeping the diaries and the writings of journals as well by Puritans. Okay, the 17th century up to 1660 was dominated by Puritans, and it may be called the Puritan age or the age of Milton, who was the noblest representative of the Puritan spirit. So here basically we'll talk about it previously, the Renaissance period, the revival of learning was there in the Elizabethan period. So my dear students, here we'll focus on the Puritan beliefs and the Puritan spirit, and Milton is the greater, you can say, representative of that age. The Puritan age, personal righteousness and civil and religious liberty. In other words, it aimed at making men honest and free. So basically, as we saw in the Elizabethan age, like when King Henry VIII ruled over England, he was a Protestant. So what happened, like he banned the Catholic prayers and all kind of Catholic practices in the church. So here you can see in the Puritan age, like basically the concept was to make men honest and free, and there was religious liberty as well, and the personal righteousness in and civil and religious liberty. So basically this civil liberty is relevant to the society, and religious ability, like you are free to follow any kind of religion while living in England. So basically this is the main aspect of the Puritan age. The name Puritan was at first given to those who advocated certain changes in the form of worship of the Reformed English Church under Elizabeth. So basically that is why they are known as Puritans, because they walked under Elizabeth and Queen Elizabeth, and then they made certain changes in the form of worship of the Reformed English Church. So basically here you'll find out the Reformed English Church as well, and that is why they are known as the Puritan, because they gave a lot of importance to the religious and the civil liberty, plus personal righteousness. Puritanism in course of time became a national movement against the tyrannical rule of the king and stood for the liberty of the people. So here, dear students, you can see like why we gave them this name Puritans, or Puritanism. That was a movement, and it with the passage of time it became very much popular among the society members, fine, and because it was against the tyrannical rule of the king and stood up for the liberty of the people. Previously people were very bound. You can see from the example like the Protestant church and the Catholic church, the Catholic group of people, they were not allowed to perform their prayers or other religious duties in the church. So there was no liberty at that time. So the Puritans, they fight for the human liberty. They think that it's totally up to you, you're free in choosing your religion, fine. So basically that was the tyrannical rule of the king. Who was the king? Henry VIII. So here, my dear students, you'll find out the difference, the beliefs of the Renaissance period and the things which we are following in the Puritan age. People, they started fighting for their rights. People, they started giving rights to the humanity, of the individuals of their society. So basically that was the difference. First of all, we'll talk about Puritan poetry. The Puritan poetry, also called the Jacobean and Caroline poetry, during the reigns of James I and Charles I respectively. As I told you before, like Jacobean period is known with the name of James I, and the Caroline is known because of Charles I. Can be divided into three parts. Basically when we talk about Puritan poetry, so this is divided into three parts. So one is the poetry of the school of Spenser. So my dear students, here you'll have to focus on the school of Spenser, then metaphysical school, and then the poetry of Cavalier poets, fine. So the point you have to note down over here is that Puritan poetry has three phases, and we have divided it into three different parts. One is that of the school of Spenser, the other one is like a metaphysical school, and the third one is the Cavalier poets. The school of Spenser, first of all we'll talk about it. The Spenserians were the followers of Spenser. So basically, who are the Spenserians? As the very name suggests you, that this is from the word Spenser. These are the followers of Spenser, fine. In spite of the changing conditions and literary taste, which resulted in the reaction against the diffuse, flamboyant, Italianate poetry which Spenser and Sidney had made fashionable during the 16th century, fine. So they prefer to follow Spencer and consider him as their master. So basically here my dear students, when you say like they refused all the like Puritan, on one hand we are saying that the Puritans, they refused or they rejected all the ideas from the Renaissance age. So here they are following Spencer because Spencer belonged to the Elizabethan age, fine. So my dear students, basically the point was that although Spencer was also following the same Italianate poetry, okay, and Sidney was also one of them, and they made it a fashion as well during the 16th century or the Elizabethan period, but still the Spencerians or the follower of Spencer, they preferred to follow Spencer and considered him as their master, right? So what you have to note down over here, like on one hand they are against the Italian beliefs, or they are against the Italianate poetry as well. On the other hand, they are following Spencer because they consider him as their master and they were impressed by him as well, fine. So they took him as an individual only, not as part of any other kind of movement, fine. The most thoroughgoing followers of Spencer during the reign of James I were Phineas Fletcher and Giles Fletcher. So they were brothers, fine. So basically during the reign of James I, these two brothers, they were the followers of Spencer, okay. Phineas Fletcher wrote a number of Spencerian pastorals and allegories. His most ambitious poem, The Purple Island, fine. So basically what is this poem about? This is based on the pastoral and allegorical poems of Spencer, and it portrays in a minutely detailed allegory the physical and mental constitution of man, the struggle between temperance and his foes, fine, the will of man and Satan. So basically how can we say that this is based upon Spencer's poetry? Why? Because he's following the same tradition over here. It is about the physical and mental constitution of man plus the struggle between temperance and his foes and will of man and Satan. So the most important point over here is the will of man and Satan, fine, and then mental construction of man as well. The forces which are involved in constructing the mentality of man are discussed in the Purple Island, fine. Other poets who wrote under the influence of Spencer were William Browne, George Wither and William Drummond, fine. So here students, you can see like these are the other poets who walked under the influence of Spencer. Spencer belonged to the Elizabethan age, but still he has an influence on the Puritan age, and many writers, they followed Spencer, okay. Browne's important poetical work in Britannica Pastorals, which shows all the characteristics of Elizabethan pastoral poetry. It is obviously inspired by Spencer's Fairy Queen and Sidney's Arcadia. So here you can see we are introducing one more writer over here, okay, Sidney, fine. So my dear students, here you can see that the Puritan writers, they were not only impressed by Spencer, but they are also following Sidney, and two works which are very much influencing for them, that is one by Spencer and the name of the work is Fairy Queen, and the other one is by Sidney, the name of the work is Arcadia, fine. The same didactic tone and lyrical strain are noticed in the poetry of George Wither. His best known poems are The Shepherd's Hunting, a series of personal eloges, Fedella, and heroic epistle of over 1200 lines, and Fair Virtue, the mistress of Fellerate, a sustained and detailed lyrical eulogy of an ideal woman. So basically here, my dear students, you can see like we are focusing on the works of other authors as well, those who are impressed by Spencer and Sidney, and how did they follow their traditions during the Puritan age as well. So these are some of the works which are written by George Wither during the Puritan age. Second school of poetry, that is the poets of the metaphysical school, and Previously it was the school of Spencer, now the school of metaphysical school. John Donne, Herrick, Thomas Carew, Richard Crashaw, Henry Vaughan, George Herbert and Lord Herbert of Cherbury. These are the prominent figures from the poet of the metaphysical school. The leader of the school was Donne. So here you can see John Donne was the leader of this school. Previously Spencer was the leader of the school, although he belonged to the Elizabethan era, but still people, they were following him. Okay, so that is why Spencer was the leader of that school. Okay, and now the poets of the metaphysical school, and John Donne was the leader of this school. They are called the metaphysical poets not because they are highly philosophical. So when the term metaphysical we hear, usually we think that the person who is very philosophical and very intellectual person, they are all metaphysical. It's not the case. They are not we give them this attribute not because they are highly philosophical, but because the poetry is full of conceits, exaggerations, cabling about the meanings of word, display of learning, and far-fetched similes and metaphors. So my dear students, here you can see that the poet, they use conceits, okay, exaggerations. That is why their poetry is known as metaphysical poetry, not because of their philosophical thoughts. Okay, this is just because of the use of the language, the way they compare the things, the way they give examples, the way they use personifications and metaphors, conceits, similes. And I gave you the briefing relevant to these devices in one of my lectures. It was Dr. Johnson who, in his essay on Abraham Cowley, in his Lives of the Poet, used the term metaphysical. So here, my dear students, if somebody asks you who used the term metaphysical for the first time, so on the spot you will have to tell him or her that it was Dr. Johnson who, in his essay on Abraham Cowley, in his Lives of the Poets, used the term metaphysical for the first time. So metaphysical poets are not poets who are very highly philosophical and they use very philosophical words or kind of thing. This is just because of the use of the different literary terms in their poetry. Fine. The metaphysical poets were honest, original thinker. Okay, so they were not imitating any previous poet, as in the first school of that was relevant to Spencer. They were following the Elizabethan age. They are honest and they are original thinkers of their thoughts as well, and for the very first time they introduced the metaphysical poetry in English literature. Fine. They try to analyze their feelings and experience, even the experience of life. So they were like that was their poetry is basically based on their analysis of their own personal feelings and experiences, even their experiences on love. Fine. They were also aware of the life and were concerned with death, burial, descent into hell, etc. So basically their poetry is based on everything whatsoever is present in their life. They are very much aware of their life, the life after death, and the life in the hell or in the paradise as well. Fine. Though they hoped for immortality, they were obsessed by the consciousness of mortality, which was often expressed in a mood of mawkish disgust. So here, my dear students, you can see that was their wish to be immortal. Okay, so here when we say that although they are obsessed with the consciousness of morality as well, but still they do realize that they are not here on this earth forever. They do realize that was just their wish to be immortal. Okay, John Donne, the very prominent figure from the second school of the Puritan Age poetry, John Donne. Fine. So his era started from 1537 and was ended in 1631. Metaphysical poetry. So my dear students, what you have to keep in mind over here is that John Donne is known for his metaphysical works. Okay, his best known works are the Progress of the Soul. Here again you can see that they usually focus on the real life incidents, okay, the progress of the soul, and anatomy of the world, and epithelium. His poetry can be divided into three parts, okay. One part is amorous, the other one is metaphysical, and the third one is satirical. Fine. So here, my dear students, you can see that basically his best known work is The Progress of the Soul and Anatomy of the World, the Elegy, and the Epithelium. Fine. So if we divide his poetry into different parts, so first part is that of amorous, okay, amorous. The first part is amorous poetry, the other one is the metaphysical poetry, and the third one is satirical poetry. Although he is known as the master of the metaphysical poetry, but you can, if you divide his work, so the metaphysical thoughts would be present in his second period of poetry. The Progress of the Soul and Metapsychosis, okay, these are his works. Fine. Robert Herrick, okay, this is also one of the metaphysical poets, and he belonged to the metaphysical school. He wrote amorous as well as religious verse, but it is an account of the poem of the former type, love poems, for which he is famous. So basically Robert Herrick is famous, although he wrote religious verse as well, but he is famous for his love poems, okay. And he has much in common with the Elizabethan songwriters, but on account of the pensive fantasy and a meditative strain, especially in his religious work, Herrick is included in the metaphysical school of Donne. So my dear students, here you can see, like, if we talk about mediation of a fantasy, of imagination, so his love poetry is relevant to the Elizabethan era, the way the writers used to write songs, so his love poetry is relevant to them. But why do we say, like, if he is still mediating the Elizabethan age, so how can we say that he belongs to the metaphysical school? Okay, why? Because, you know, if we look at his religious poetry, that is purely based on the metaphysical school of Donne, okay. So Donne was, you can say, the leader of that school, okay. So Herrick is included in the metaphysical school of Donne just because of his religious verse and not because of his love poem. So my dear students, here again I'm telling you that we are talking about Robert Herrick. Fine. Thomas Carew, on whom the influence of Donne was stronger, was the finest lyric writer of his age. So he was very much impressed by Donne's poetry, so we can see that influence in his writings as well, and he was very much famous for writing the lyrics, okay. Though he lacks the spontaneity and freshness of Herrick, previously when we were talking about Herrick, so he was more spontaneous, and he was more, like, he brought fresh thoughts in literature. He lacks, like Thomas Carew, he lacks those qualities. He is superior to him in fine workmanship. So although as far as the spontaneous attitude or the spontaneous writings are concerned, he lacks these qualities, but the thing is that he is superior to him in his fine workmanship. So he is superior to him in this regard. Moreover, though possessing the strength and vitality of Donne's verse, Carew's verse is neither rugged nor obscure as that of the master, okay. So here, like, if we compare Thomas Carew works with, you know, with Donne's verse, so here you can see that it's not at all obscure, okay. It is quite clear and it is easy to understand as well. His persuasion of love is a fine piece of rhythmic cadence and harmony. So here you can see that this is his very popular work, The Persuasion of Love, and this is a piece of rhythmic harmony, okay. So here you can see, like, although he possessed, you know, the strength and vitality of Donne's verse, but his verse is not obscure, it's not rugged, it's not much difficult to understand, because the conceits and the literary terms he has used in his works, those are not that much difficult. Fine. So here you can see the rhythmic harmony is also there. Richard Crashaw, he is a fundamentally religious poet. So my dear students, here you'll have to notice one thing. We are talking about the metaphysical school of poets. Okay, so Richard Crashaw, he is a religious poet, and his best work is The Flaming Heart. Okay, here we're drawing the comparison of different poets as well, though less imaginative as compared to Herrick and intellectually inferior to Carew. At times Crashaw reaches the heights of rare excellence in his poetry. So if we compare Crashaw with Herrick, so you can say he is less imaginative. Okay, he is inferior to Carew as far as his intellectual is concerned. Fine. So at times he reaches the height of rare excellence in his poetry. So some of his works, they're extraordinary, so we put his poetry in the excellent portion here. Fine. George Herbert, another metaphysical poet, the most widely read of all the poets belonging to the metaphysical school, as we are talking about the metaphysical school of poets, except of course Donne. So you can say, like, usually people although he is a widely read poet, but when we compare it to Donne, he is not of that high status. This is due to the clarity of his expression and the transparency of his conceits. Fine. So my dear students, here you can see this is all about, he is very much clear in expressing the things, and his transparency of conceits as well. The kind of conceits he use in his poetry, those are very much transparent. In his religious words, there is simplicity as well as natural. When we talk about his religious words, there is simplicity as well as natural earnestness. So he was a kind of spontaneous poet. So my dear students, here we can see that he is a kind of spontaneous poet as well, and the kind of verses he used, those were very simple. Mixed with the didactic strain, there is also a current of quaint humor in his poetry. So basically, when we talk about his writing, so those are not purely serious, or those are not based on some serious aspects all the time. They are quaint with humor as well. Fine. I just want to summarize the metaphysical poets to you people. What exactly do we mean by metaphysical poetry? So it's not something which is like they are highly philosophical and intellectual people. It all depends upon the kind of literary terms they use, conceits, metaphors and similes and personification. That is why they are known as metaphysical poets, because they always try to deliver their meaning in an indirect way, and they leave on the reader's shoulder as well to infer any kind of meaning from their writings. Okay, the metaphysical poets show the spiritual and moral favor of the Puritan, as well as the frank immoralist tendency of the Elizabethans. So here you can see, like, some of they show the spiritual and moral favor of the Puritans and the frank immoralist tendency of the Elizabethans as well. Okay, to put everything in a nutshell, I'll just try to explain that they are basically showing, like, metaphysical poets, they show the Elizabethan thought as well as the Puritan thoughts. Fine. So just have to keep it in your mind. The way they use the language, that is very much important. They are not highly philosophical or highly intellectual people as compared to the other schools of thoughts. They might be same, but the kind of conceits, metaphors, similes, personification or other literary terminologies they used to use in their poetry, those are very much important. The Cavalier poets, the other school of thought, the third school of poets. The Cavalier poets followed Ben Jonson. Okay, so here basically they follow Ben Jonson. Okay, another important literary figure in the history of English literature. Jonson followed the classical method in his poetry as in his drama. So basically he follows the classical method still in his poetry. He imitated Horace by writing, like him, satires, elegies, epistles and complimentary verses. So basically he used to imitate this writer. The name of the writer is Horace. But though his verse possesses classical dignity and good sense, it does not have its grace and ease. So here, my dear students, Ben Jonson is a cavalier poet, but his work is not that much easy to understand, and it's not that much graceful as well. His lyrics and songs are different from those of Shakespeare. So if we draw a comparison of Johnson's works and Shakespearean's works, so here, my dear students, you can see that his lyrics and songs are also different from those of Shakespeare's, whereas Shakespeare's songs are pastoral, popular, and artless. So Johnson's are sophisticated, particularized, and have intellectual and emotional rationality. So my dear students, here you can see basically Shakespearean lyrics, those are very much common among all ages, and they are very much common in all societies as well. But if we talk about Johnson lyrics, so here you can see these are very sophisticated, these are particularized, and they are limited to one particular group of people, and they have intellectual and human emotional rationality as well, okay, and these things were not present in Shakespeare's songs. The important cavalier poets were Herrick, John Milton, a very important literary figure in the Puritan age. His early poetry is lyrical, that is in form of songs, ballads, and sonnets. The important poems of the early period are the Hymn on the Nativity, that was written in 1629, La Allegro, El Penseroso, that was written in 1632, Les Cidas 1637, and Comus 1937. The hymn written when Milton was only 21, so he was quite young when he wrote his first poem, that was in form of song, that was written when he was only 21, shows that his lyrical genius was already highly developed even at the age of 21. So these are some of his important works, early poetry. Here we are talking about his early poetry. Fine. Paradise Lost, again a landmark in the history of English literature. So that is a work by Shakespeare. The subject matter of Shakespeare, a landmark in the history of English literature. The work that is written by Milton, the name of the work is Paradise Lost, okay. The subject matter of Paradise Lost consists of the casting out from heaven of the fallen angels, their planning of revenge in hell, Satan's flight, man's temptation and fall from grace, and the promise of redemption, okay. Against the vast background, Milton projects his own philosophy of the purposes of human existence and attempts to justify the ways of God to men. So basically you can see that Milton's poetry, Milton's Paradise Lost is purely based on the religion, okay. It is all about Satan and how the men come out of the heaven, and the story of the fallen angels and the planning to revenge in hell, and then the Satan's flight, then man's temptation and fall from grace, and the promise of redemption as well, okay. Against the vast background, basically this is about to justify the ways of God to man. This is just a justification kind of thing, okay, the Paradise Lost. In Paradise Lost, the most prominent is the figure of Satan, who possesses the qualities of Milton himself. So here, my dear students, see the biographical elements are also present here, or you can say poetry is a reflection of a poet's mind. Here we are defending this point, there is a character and the hero of the Paradise Lost is Satan. So here Satan possesses all the qualities of Milton, okay, and who represents the indomitable heroism of the Puritans against Charles I, okay. So here represents the indomitable heroism of the Puritans against Charles I. So here you can again see the political factors which are involved in formulation of the literature, these are the this Paradise Lost is written against Charles I, okay, and the Satan possesses all the qualities of Milton, and that was written in blank verse. It didn't follow any particular kind of rhyme scheme there. That was written in blank verse, okay. He was one of the masters of blank verse as well. Jacobean and Caroline drama. This is another. Previously we were talking about poetry, okay, and we talked about three schools in Puritan, three schools of poets in the Puritan age, and then we focus on John Milton and his work Paradise Lost. Now we are moving towards Jacobean and Caroline drama, okay. Ben Jonson, he wrote dramas, and then George Marston, Thomas Dekker, Thomas Heywood, Thomas Middleton, Cyril Tourneur, John Webster, John Fletcher, Francis Beaumont, Philip Messinger, John Ford, and James Shirley. Okay, the dramatists of the Jacobean or Caroline period were Ben Jonson, John Marston, Thomas Dekker, Thomas Heywood, Thomas Middleton, Cyril Tourneur, John Webster, John Fletcher, Francis Beaumont, Philip Messinger, John Ford, and James Shirley. So these are the dramatists during the Jacobean or the Caroline period. As again I am telling you, the Jacobean and the Caroline period, they were under the rules of James I and Charles I. Okay, the other one is that of prose. Again, my dear students, you can see that I'm just giving you the briefing of all the periods here, fine. So prose, the greatest prose writers were Bacon, Burton, Milton, Sir Thomas Browne, Jeremy Taylor, and Clarendon. Okay, so here, my dear students, you can see like the Jacobean and Caroline prose. Okay, Bacon is one of the prominent figures. Okay, he wrote certain essays and he was very much famous for writing his essays, fine. So what you have to keep in mind, like prose was on its climax during the Jacobean and the Caroline period, fine. Francis Bacon. Okay, when we talk about poetry, who was basically the prominent figure in Puritan age as far as poetry is concerned, this is my question from you. Just guess about it. Okay, you're quite right. John Milton was the prominent figure. He was the most dominating, poet of the Puritan age. Okay, what about Puritan age drama? Who is the prominent figure? Just guess about it from the lecture, whatever I have told you. Okay, my dear students, it was Ben Jonson. Okay, so who is the prominent figure as far as drama is concerned. Now when we talk about Jacobean or Caroline prose, or in other words Puritan age prose, so who is the most prominent figure? The name of the writer is Bacon. Okay, Francis Bacon. His full name was Francis Bacon, and he started writing his essays in 1561, and he published his last essay in 1628. Okay, Bacon belongs both to the Elizabethan and Jacobean period. So basically here you'll see the influence of Elizabethan plus the Jacobean periods in the writings of Francis Bacon. Bacon is best known for his essays. So my dear students, here you'll have to, like, he is a prose writer and he is best known for his essays, fine. For his essays, in which he has given his views about the art of managing man and getting on successfully in life. Basically, he told man the ways of living and how to manage themselves. So this is a very core concept of his essays, fine. So he is very much famous for his essays. Again, I'm telling you, they may be considered as a kind of manual for statesmen and princes. So basically, through his essays, he delivered a message to the statesmen and princes as well. Okay, the tone of essay is that of a worldly man who wants to secure material success and prosperity. That is why their moral standard is not high. So here, when we talk about the moral standards of the essay, that is not very much high. Why? Because this is in that kind of tone where a worldly man who is fighting for the secure material success, okay, and the prosperity as well, fine. So here you would not find the moral standard which are very much high in his essays. So my dear students, what you have to keep in mind while doing the history of English literature, the Puritan age, when we talk about the prose writers, so Francis Bacon is very much popular for writing his essays, and in his essays basically he tried to manage man and getting on successfully in life. So he told man ways and the directions to follow and the paths which he or she should avoid, okay, and you know, the ways of success as well. So basically, in other words, we can say that he provided a menu for, you know, statesmen and princes as well, the people who are basically in rule, who are ruling England at that time. So that was a kind of manual for them. Fine. So here, my dear students, you just have to keep in mind the basic concepts relevant to Bacon's writing. Okay, he was an essay writer, plus he used to manage man, and he is used to provide man different kinds of you know things where, okay, by following whom a man can be successful in his life. So basically this is a kind of providing direction to the people of the society, and specifically to statesmen and princes. So my dear students, you just have to keep in mind the basic concepts of Bacon's essays. Besides the essay, Bacon wrote Henry VII, the first piece of scientific history in the English language, and the advancement of learning. So here, my dear students, he was not just limited to writing essays. He wrote some other things as well, and one of his famous writings, that is one of his famous writings is, you know, Henry VII, and you know, the first piece of scientific history. So basically that is the reign of Henry VII's reign was based on the scientific history. So he was not just limited to the, you know, social issues in the society. He dealt with the you know scientific issues of his society of that time as well, okay, and the advancement of learning. So here, my dear students, you can see the advancement of learning. That is again important aspect, that the very name suggests you that the learning, the techniques, and what were the advancements which are taking place as far as learning is concerned. So here you can see, although he is best known for, you know, his essay writing, but the other things which he wrote, that is about one writing is about the scientific history of England, and the name of that writing is Henry VII, and then the advancement of learning. Fine. So it doesn't mean that Francis Bacon was only the only one author who wrote prose in the Puritan age. This is not the case. Actually, my dear students, again I'm telling you that basically we are discussing about the prominent figures of one particular era only. We're not focusing on all the literary figures of that era. Fine. So you don't need to get worried that why we are ignoring the rest of the people. Definitely we cannot cover all the poets, all the writers, all the prose writers over here. Fine. So just have to keep in mind that the basic concept, or you know, Francis Bacon, why he is you know, the prominent figure of that era. You just have to clarify your concept here, and the rest of the people, those would be imitating the prominent figure of that particular era. I just want to give you a briefing of today's lecture. That is, like, we started our discussion with the 17th century literature, and then we divide the 17th century into two periods. One is that of the Puritan or John Milton's period, and the other one is of the Dryden period, or that is also known as the Restoration period. And then we further divided Puritan age into Jacobean and Caroline periods as well. Then we move towards the poets in the Puritan age, and then we discussed three periods relevant to poetry in the Puritan age. First period belongs to Spenser, and the second school was that of metaphysical poets, and the third school was that of the cavalier poets. So after discussing those three schools of poets, then we move towards John Milton, who is the most prominent figure in this era, the Puritan age. So my dear students, then we focused on his Paradise Lost, why that was very much famous among all people of society, why that is still famous, and that is also known as the landmark in the history of English literature. We talked about the importance of the Paradise Lost. Then we moved towards the drama. And who is the prominent figure there? Ben Jonson. Okay, then we came for discussing the prose writings. Okay, and Francis Bacon is the most prominent literary figure as well as the prose writings of 17th century literatures are concerned. Fine. Another one is Robert Burton, and he is known for his anatomy of melancholy. Fine. So here, my dear students, you can see that they all are, to some extent, they are imitated by their master. I mean over here, who is the most dominating personality or poet or the writer of that very era. For example, when we were talking about metaphysical poets, so John Donne was their leader. Spencer school of poets, Spencer was the leader, although Spencer belonged to the Elizabethan age, but still he had some influence on Puritan age as well. And the Cavalier poets, Ben Jonson was the prominent figure over. You get to know about their leader in a good way, so definitely the rest of the things won't be much difficult for you to understand. So Robert Burton, basically his theme is also driven by Francis Bacon as well, the prose writer of that time. He is also the Robert Burton is also one of the prose writers of that time, and he is known for his work, The Anatomy of Melancholy. Okay, these are the basics of melancholy as well. Fine. Sir Thomas Browne belong entirely to a different category. With him, the manner of writing is more important than the substance. He is famous for religio medici hydrographia. Okay, religio medici hydrographia. Fine. So basically, he belongs to entirely a new different category. How? Because for him, the manner of writing is more important than the substance. So he is, you can say, totally ignoring the contents of the writing. He thinks of the manner of writing that is very much important, and that is why he is famous for writing in a good manner. Fine. So Sir Thomas Browne, he was also a prose writer, and he was famous for writing in a good way, and not because of the substance, because he was of the view that writing manner is more important as compared to the substance or the issue which you are discussing. So it's totally in poet's hands, the way he is describing any kind of situation. Okay, so substance, you can put any kind of substance in that kind of manner, and then you can create that kind of impact as well on the minds of the reader. So for him, it's not like if you are discussing any kind of issue, that's not much important. The way of presenting the things that is important. So everything is everything is in writer's hand. It's totally up to him the way he molds anything. Fine. So he entirely ignores the the substance of the writings. Okay. The other thing, his famous works are Religio Medici and Hydrographia or the Urn Burial. Okay. So here you can see like all the ages, their combination of different kinds of people over there. Some of the people, they focus on the substance or on the contents or on the theme of any particular kind of work, but some, they focus on the manner of writing, the style of writing, the tone with the poet or the writer adore. That is very much important for them. So here we are going in entirely a new concept of presenting the things. So basically the point is that like it's not the theme which is important, it's not the central idea of the situation that is important. It is the way you put certain situation into action and the way you influence the mind of the reader, that is very much important. Okay. So my dear student, here again I just want to give you the summary. I just want to summarize the lecture, today's lecture. Dear students, we took a start with the Puritan age, the introduction to the Puritan age, and what were the beliefs and the ideas, and how the Puritan age was different from the Renaissance period in the history of English literature. And here you can see that we divided Puritan poetry into 4 periods. One is that of the school of Spencer. So you might be thinking again that Spencer belonged to the Elizabethan era. So why we still have an effect of Spencer over here? Was did he write anything in the Puritan age as well, or something like that? Basically the point is that the school of Spencer doesn't mean that the Spencer was also one of the writers over there. They were the writer, the rest of the writers, they were following the they were imitating Spencer, okay, and they were imitating the Elizabethan trends of writing the poetry. That is why they are the part of the school of the Spencer, sorry, the school of Spencer, not the Spencer. So that is why they are part of the school of Spencer, the poet of the metaphysical poetry. So here, my dear students, you can see like metaphysical poets are not highly philosophical people, or they're not much intellectual people as if we compare them to any ordinary poet. So basically this is the way they have used conceits, exaggerations and metaphors, similes, personification and other literary devices into their writings in order to create a long-lasting impact on the minds of the readers. Okay, basically metaphysical poets, they experienced they put their experience into their writing. Either their experiences are based on friendship, on love, on anger, on hatred or anything. Basically they try to experience everything and then they put everything in form of writing. Okay, and then we talked about the Cavalier poets, and who was a prominent figure among the Cavalier poets was Ben Jonson. Okay, and then John Milton. We have discussed his his writings. I just give you the briefing of his other writings with the particular focus on the Paradise Lost and the themes of the Paradise Lost, and how man was sent out of heaven because of a sin over there, committing a sin over there. And you can see the autobiographical elements are also present over here. Why? Because Satan possesses all the qualities of Milton. So it doesn't mean that Milton told us directly that it was me who is Satan in the Paradise Lost. It is the reader who analyzed with a passage of time after reading his book The Paradise Lost, that is in different volumes as well. Okay, so he realized, so not in different volume, please cut it, like it was reader who analyzed that Satan possesses all the qualities of the that Satan possesses all the qualities of Milton. So my dear students, here you can see the autobiographical elements are present in Milton's writing. Okay, because he was very much in favor of Satan throughout the Paradise Lost. Okay, my dear students, what you have to notice over here is that the way John Milton portrayed Satan in the Paradise Lost, that is very much important. Okay, and that is why the readers after reading his Paradise Lost, they get to know that it is basically Milton himself who is there in form of Satan in the Paradise Lost. Okay, so this is really a very interesting book. Okay, that is in different episodes as well. So I would recommend you to read Paradise Lost. Okay, and then the Jacobean and Caroline drama, and who is the prominent figure of the Jacobean or Caroline drama was Ben Jonson, and rest all are the imitators of Francis Bacon. Is the prominent figure. He is you can say the dominating figure of a prose writing in Caroline and Jacobean period, and he is very much famous for writing his essays, for example, of love, of friendship, of love and of friendship. So basically he suggested man the way to lead life and the things which a man should avoid in order to be successful in life, and basically that was a manual for the statesmen and princes that was recommended for the political leaders of the country of the political leaders of that times. That's why these things are very much important, and he suggested them what to do and what to not to do in order to be good human beings. Okay, so my dear students, so far we are over with the Anglo-Saxon, the Anglo-Norman, the Elizabethan era, or the Renaissance, and the Puritan Age. Okay, in the next lecture we'll talk about the Restoration period, and that is also known as the Age of Dryden, and this is the second half of the 17th century. Fine. So far you can see like the way English literature has developed with the passage of time, and the influences of different political movements, literary movements, and of different eras on English literature. Those are very much obvious. I just want to recall some of the things from the from the previous periods as well. Basically, Anglo-Saxon period, the writings were not in, you can say, in the writings are not saved and they are not stored. Okay, the prominent writing of that time was Beowulf. Okay, and there were certain imaginations were involved over there, and the certain characters we have discussed in detail. And then the Anglo-Norman period, where you could see later on in Renaissance period, we call that Anglo-Norman period the medieval ages in the history of English literature, the Dark Ages. Okay, and then we move towards the Renaissance period, and who are the prominent writers in the Renaissance period. Basically, that age is in possession of William Shakespeare. Okay, and he is very much he's a very much famous writer and a universal writer as well. Even after centuries, his work is still famous, and we discussed about his writings. Okay, and the factors which are other factors which are involved, the political factors, that how different ruling parties they change the church and how they rule over the church, and they introduce the Catholic beliefs or the Protestant beliefs, and who was ruling over there on that country, and the influence of Italian writers when they of the Greek writers, of the Greek scholars, and the influence of the Greek scholars on English literature as well. So my dear students, here you can see the last stage which we have covered today, that is the Puritan Age, and that is the first half of the 17th century as well. And you can see the influence of Spenser on this age, and then we talked about the metaphysical poetry. That is entirely a new concept, and that was introduced in the 17th century. And then we focused on Donne, who is a metaphysical poet, and then we moved towards Cavalier poets, and Ben Jonson is the prominent figure, and then John Milton. Fine. So here, my dear students, you can see how the factors which are there in making a society, which are involved in writing the literature as well. For example, John Milton, we can say, after reading Paradise Lost, when he is quite in favor of Saturn, so we can say that he has that Satanic qualities in him. Fine. So that is why he portrayed Saturn in that way. Fine. So my dear students, what you have to keep in mind is that the literary movements and the political movements and the religious movements which are going on in any particular era, how they affect the literature. So basically that is the purpose of teaching you English literature as well. So basically the development of poetry, drama, and prose. Fine. The kind of verses poets they use, and then the traditions which they follow in drama, Greek tragedies, all the ancient Greek tragedies, or what kind of things they are following. So everything is present. So here you can see that the things, they are interlinked with each other. We cannot say that literature is only literary kind of work, the things which you write. Here the other factors which are involved in the formulation of literature, those are very much important. The literary movements which are going on in any particular country, the religious reforms in any country, the political movement of that country, who is the ruling party, and what do they usually do with with their subordinates. Okay, and how here basically the aspect is that of the component is that of power. Fine. For example, if you are in power, so you can do anything. You are allowed to write the things, you are allowed to publish the things. If you are in the ruling party, if you are the head of the church, so definitely everything is in your control. The rest of the society will move according to your provided directions. Otherwise they are not allowed to follow their own path. So here in Puritan Age, you can say that how they focused on the liberty of church and the liberty of human beings and the freedom which society needs. Okay, they focus on these things. And in Elizabethan period, during the era of Elizabeth, so we focused on different writers of that era, and in Anglo-Saxon period and in Anglo-Norman period as well. Like you can draw a comparative study of all the literary works which are present in different eras, or you can have a general review of all the eras as well. Fine. So my dear students, the point of focus here is not just to give you the dates and to memorize the works of any particular author or any particular literary movement. Not at all. Basic purpose of teaching history of English literature to you is to make the concept clear to you, that how the factors which are involved in making the literature, and how those factors they influence the literature, and how those factors they influence the writer's personality, and how can we analyze any literature. So the things are these things are important. My dear students, after dealing with history of English literature, so whenever you will be analyzing any novel, any poetic work or any drama, so my dear students, you'll have to take care of the rest of the things, the factors which are involved in the formulation of literature, not like the literal meaning of anything. Fine. So these are the things. For example, if you're analyzing any of the poems that is written by John Donne, so you should know that he was a metaphysical poet, so he uses conceits a lot, and then a lot of exaggerations are there. While dealing with the Paradise Lost, the idea should be clear to you that Satan possesses all the qualities of John Milton. So basically Milton represented himself in form of Satan there. Okay, if we talk about Bacon, if you are asked to analyze Bacon's essays, so this must be clear to you that he was trying to provide human beings, he was trying to provide citizens of his country a manual what to do and what not to do, in order to make them mature and in order to make them the good citizens of the country. Fine. Okay, his essays are although very brief, and he used very simple language in his essays. Fine. And he is very much famous for using very small sentences as well. Fine. So my dear students, these are the prominent literary figures on whom we focused on. Okay, and you can see, like, with the passage of time, with different invasions, okay, with different discoveries, you can see like how the word got developed with the passage of time. Okay, my dear students, here you can see, like, now I guess the things would be a bit easy for you. After telling you about all the ages and the periods in the history of English literature, will focus on some of the works which are very prominent in the history of English literature as well, in order to practically apply whatever we are learning now. Okay, the practical application is very much important, and it would make you a critical thinker as well, how to analyze, how to compare different pieces of work, how to draw, how to find out the differences there. So the basic, I'm just trying to make it part of your long-term memory. Like I just wanted to create you an image of all the centuries in your mind. So in this way, it would be a child's play, a kind of child's play for you to analyze any piece of work, because in your poetry, you can say, course, you'll be dealing with the classical poetry nowadays. So if you basically know the history of English literature, history is not just the year by year description of something. That is why this is not my purpose to tell you the dates and the important works only. Basically the concept is that the factors which are involved, the circumstances in which the writer, any particular writer, has written any kind of work, what was the situation of that time, okay, and what were the trends, what was the religion of that time, what were the who were the political parties of that time. So basically these concepts must be what was the economical situation of the country at that time, okay, who was the ruling party, who was the ruling religious, you can say, who was ruling on church at that time. So these things are important. Fine. Next time when we meet, we'll focus on the Restoration Age, that is also known as the Age of Dryden, and then we'll do the comparative study of all the ages as well. So this is your task to focus on all the ages and try to find out the similarities and differences of different ages. Fine. So in this way the concept would be much easier for you to understand. Like for example, if somebody asks you what are basically the characteristics of Puritan age, or analyze Milton's work, so definitely the thought, you have built up your thought in that way, like Milton belonged to the Puritan age, and what were the Puritan ideas at that time, or what were the Elizabethan idea at that time, and the traditions which Spencer followed in his work, and later on after Spencer who followed those traditions. So these things should be clear in your mind in order to analyze any literary kind of work. Okay, so basically I'm just providing you the basis of analyzing the kind of analyzing any poem, any novel, any drama, okay, and to have a critical view on that. So I just want to make you critical thinker. Just think about it. And if you watch any movie which is based on any drama, so basically you are not just focusing on the literal meaning of that movie, or if you are reading Donne's poem, so basically that is not like you're just getting the theme from there, what is basically behind the scene. So you have to analyze the powers which are behind any literary kind of work. So basically that is the point. Okay, my dear students, hope you are enjoying studying English literature with me. My dear students, hope you are enjoying studying history of English literature with me, and I just want to make it as much simpler for you as I can. Okay, so the references from where I took the books from where I took the material, those are the A Critical History of English Literature by David Ditches and A Critical History of English Literature by Dr. Molig. So these are two references I have used in today's lecture. So for the rest of the details you can find the information in these books. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.